Are we ready? Are we ready to go live? Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Metron, coming to you live from beautiful Kirkwood neighborhood. I'm assuming everybody's met everybody here. Those of you that are logging on, glad that you're watching. We're super glad to have Ed with us, who is down from Knoxville, and always happy to have him. I specifically decreed today that we were going to feel the presence of God. I don't think I've ever prayed that before, but today I said I really want everybody to feel it. We're always in the presence of God, and sometimes you're more conscious of it than at other times, but today I really want us all to feel it. So before we'll open with the Lord's Prayer, and then I'm going to do a meditation. But let's just get yourself centered for a moment, and I want you to clear your mind. You can do it even better through the meditation, but go ahead and be intentional. Enter His gates with thanksgiving, enter into His courts with praise. But go ahead and get your mind in that zone. Get your body prepared to feel God's presence today. In fact, if you're comfortable with it, just lift your hands up. Just as a physical exercise that says to every cell in your body, we're in the presence of God. We're in the presence of spirit, of transcendence. We honor the presence of God in this place today. Amen. Let's say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, presence of divine love and light that lives within us and within all of life, hallowed be thy name. We invoke the powerful creative nature of all that is sacred and holy. Thy kingdom come. We embrace the healing essence that is the kingdom of heaven within us. Thy will be done. We accept our greatest good as we align with our divine nature, on earth as it is in heaven, knowing that the affairs of our lives reflect our evolving consciousness. Give us this day our daily bread. Each day we receive great blessings from within and throughout all the activities of our lives. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We accept the divine nature of all things and all people, including ourselves, as we move away from judgment and toward greater awareness of divine presence. And lead us not into temptation. We shall be vigilant in expressing and experiencing the oneness with all life, but deliver us from evil as we are learning to live without fault-finding and suffering. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. For we accept the consciousness of divine perfection with all its power and glory right here, right now, and forever. Amen, and so it is. Good. Tell the person next to you you're glad to be sitting next to them, and then you may be seated. And Charles, if we can just start some meditation music, we'll do maybe about a 5-minute one. Both feet on the floor, sit up straight, get your hands in some posture that allows an energy flow. Concentrate on your breathing. We're going to go in through the nose, hold it, out through the mouth. In, hold, out. Exhale. Now, while you just become consistent in your breathing, I want you to sort of make a gratitude list in your mind. Just for a few things in your mind, name off 3, 4, 5, 6 things that come to your awareness that you're grateful for. You may just be grateful to be here today. That's valid. Grateful for your health. Grateful for love in your life. If you're at home, just flow with us. Beautiful. Good. Y'all have become meditation masters. Y'all get into it so easily these days. That was a good one. Let me bring the lights back up. Thank you. Charles, y'all come on in. Hey, how are you? Couple of announcements. Next Sunday, and only next Sunday, Chandra Corelli is going to be with us doing the music. So we're looking forward to that. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, back from your cruise? You have a good time? I feel your cruise vibes. So we're looking forward to having her. Also, we haven't done this in a while, but we're getting into a position where we're getting a little bit more back to normal. So we do have a outreach this month. And our outreach is the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And I believe that us getting back into the giving mode is going to stoke the receiving part of it. So if you're not familiar with Children's Healthcare, it's a really great organization, very well vetted. So what you give this month will also go towards that. So I'm very, very happy to be getting our sea legs back again. And so that's good. Also remember Meditation Weekend number 19. is coming up on August the 5th and 6th. I'm having surgery a week from Friday. My plan is to be here on that Sunday. I may be in a sling. I don't know. I'm having shoulder replacement surgery. So I have no idea. I've got an appointment this week, so they'll explain to me what it's going to be like and what I have to do. So, but that's the plan. I don't know. I'm hoping I will not have a sling by the time we're there, but if I do, it is what it is. There's no good time to do anything. You just have to do stuff, and I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this to feel better. So, so that is the plan. I don't have a plan B for that Sunday. So that is. So I'm assuming I'm usually a pretty quick healer. So I'm planning on being here 2 weeks from today, but definitely planning on being at the meditation. That means that on that Sunday, which will actually be Metron's 9th anniversary, we will not be here. If you're not going to the meditation weekend, don't come here unless you just want to sit here in silence and, soak up the atmosphere. Remember that we were here. Today when I was getting in my car, there was a couple things in my floorboard I was throwing away. And one of my neighbors walked by. She said, "I smelled you in the elevator." I said, "Was that bad?" She goes, "No, it was good. I can always tell when you walk by." So I'm assuming that means my cologne. I don't know. But if you just want to come soak up our ambiance, but we won't be here on the 6th. All right? I think that is everything I needed to announce. Are you ready for the word? All right. Good. Are we ready, Charles? If there's a Charles out there. Okay. Welcome to the Metron Live podcast, coming to you from Metron. Beautiful, wonderful people here today. Metron people, would you welcome the podcast people? Let them know. And I am beginning a new series today, and it was one reason I want to go ahead and get into it, because I want to give myself plenty of time. I speak into this atmosphere, and I say, "Let there be light." My title this month is Spirit World Realities on Earth as It Is in Heaven. Before I show you this first scripture, I want to refer to something that I taught earlier this week on an 11:11. I was talking about how the spirit realm and the natural realm, the more you view everything through the tree of life as opposed to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the more everything looks spiritual. Eddie, the reason I said to you today, I'm glad you're here today, is I've noticed, because your whole ministry is about telling people how to get to heaven, and your family members. That was always the plan. I just want to make it through this life to get to heaven. Some kind of way I'm going to make it in. And I've noticed on several occasions, especially like when you've had your granddaughters on the beach, and you're having this moment, which I understand. It's a feeling I get when all of my kids are together. And you've alluded to the fact, maybe this is heaven. Or this is heaven. I'm not looking for, I can't imagine that streets of gold and gates of pearl, if you take that literally, I can't imagine this could be any better. Yes, I love that. He said when we get there, somebody says, "How was heaven?" And that's a huge redirect. Instead of trying to make it to heaven, it's the realization. Oil that door. It's the. Sorry, hey Claudia, come in. No, I'm sorry. The door's so squeaky. There's no way you can sneak in. But instead of trying to make it to heaven, It's to realize I'm from heaven. So I'm kind of going on that premise. And then I shared that earlier in the week, I listen to podcasts constantly, and I was listening to a podcast with Rosie O'Donnell, and she was interviewing Billy Porter. And many of you know who Billy Porter is. And they were both talking about how years ago, before either of them came out, how that directors, producers would always be telling them to hide their queerness. Like, you know, you better not let people know who you really are, or it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you negatively in show business. So I was, listening to it. It was, I think she did kind of a Pride Month theme, and he was her last interview of the month. But then he said something, and Billy Porter came out of the church. He came out of like Pentecostal church, and he said, "This is what caught my attention. You know how you just sort of be half listening to something, and then somebody says something, and it just flies all over you." He said. He said, "But even though it was difficult, I've always had angels in my life." And I knew when he said it, I knew he wasn't talking about spirit beings the way we've thought of angels. And when I did this teaching earlier, if you're interested, you can go to the hashtag JES1111, and it brings everything up. I think I just did 2 of them this past week. But I knew I was in this teaching. I was talking about times in my life where I've really had what I think was an angelic visitation, like in the conventional sense, that was really supernatural. I didn't go through the whole story again, but I referred to when we lost Jonah on the subway when he was 5 years old, and there just happened to be this woman there who found him and took him off the train. And when I thanked her, I knelt down to hug him, and when I stood back up, she had just disappeared. And I've always felt like that was an angel. And you might have had instances like that. In Hebrews it says to be courteous to people because you never know when you might be entertaining angels unawares. And I've had encounters with people that when they left, I've actually thought, was that an angel? Was that an angelic being? But I knew that wasn't really what he was talking about. He was talking about people who had been strategically placed in his life. And he said, in fact, the angel of the Lord has encamped round about me my whole life. And when he said it, I'm telling you, I just felt the anointing on it so strong. And this is the point I want to get across to you when I'm talking about the spirit world. Because it made me, it just sort of gave me this whole teaching. I think it's one of the most profound teachings I've ever done, frankly. Because I talked about when in Genesis 28, when Jacob has his vision, he lays on the stone that was just last month when King Charles was coronated. There's a stone that they put in the chair that he sits in that's called the Stone of Scone, that they historically believe is the stone that Jacob slept on when he had his vision of the ladder into heaven, or the stairway into heaven. And I've referred to that a lot of times. What I've never said before until this past Thursday night was when Jacob saw, because he had this dream, and he sees, depending on which translation you read, he sees a stairway or a ladder going into heaven, and angels are ascending and descending. Y'all familiar with the story? And the first thing he says, he doesn't say, "Oh, I had a vision of heaven and I can't wait to go." He doesn't say, "I saw streets of gold and gates of pearl. I saw my mama. I saw all the..." He didn't say any of that. He says, "How awesome is this place?" He said, "The Lord was here and I didn't even know it." It's amazing how that he has a vision of heaven and immediately says, "How awesome is this place?" And I went on to talk about the angels in your life. I had somebody do something last Sunday who responded to something that I said, which is the reason why we're able to have an outreach this month. That person, and you know who you are, I'm sure they're watching this morning, was an angel. And the point I want to get across is those people in your life who have really been angels, and you know who yours are, that person that came along right at the right time that just made all the difference in the world. What I want to get across to you, I want you to realize this month, is that is every bit as supernatural as if a winged being appeared to you. In fact, it may actually be more supernatural. Michelle, will it mess you up can you go all the way to point number 7? It's a meme I wanted to show. Is that possible? Go ahead and show me number 7 first, and then I'll go back to number 1. I just want to show you this. Abraham Joshua Heschel was a very famous rabbi. He was very involved in the civil rights movement. A really, really cool guy who lived in the middle part of the 20th century. And he said, everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. I'm going to come back to this, but this really captures the essence of what I want to get across to you in this series this month. Because I'm feeling this really, really strong, and I want you to hook your IV up to what I'm feeling, and I want you to feel it. All right? Now, I'm going to go back to referring to the angels in a minute, but let's go ahead and go back to number 1 now. Now, this is a scripture. I'm going to show you. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 5, and this is in the Message. And this is in the middle of, 2 Corinthians really plays a very important role because a lot of 2 Corinthians is a retraction of 1 Corinthians. And I love that because it shows you that the Bible's not this unalterable, written in stone thing. I mean, the very fact that there has to be a second, like for instance, in 1 Corinthians, there was something creepy going on in that church. There was a couple who was there, and we don't know exactly, and this has got a major ew factor to it, but there was a couple that was in some sort of incestuous relationship. It refers to a man and his mother who are acting as a couple. We don't know if that meant his mother-in-law or stepmother or whatever, but whatever it was gross enough that Paul wrote to them in 1 Corinthians and he said, I can't believe y'all tolerate this kind of nonsense in your church. Put this man out and turn him over to the destruction of the flesh. That's horrible. In 2 Corinthians, he comes back and he says just the opposite. He said, you know what? I've been thinking about that. He said, don't put the man out lest he be overtaken by too much sorrow. It didn't say the man repented or that they fixed their decidedly dysfunctional relationship. I've told you this before, but I went to a pastor's thing. It was in my mind this week because a guy that was there came up in my memories this week on Facebook. And the man that was running this seminar, it was a bunch of pastors sort of sitting around a big ballroom table, and we were sort of sharing the scriptures. And I could tell some of the things I had shared, the main guy wasn't that crazy with my take on the scriptures. And I wasn't trying to argue with him. It's just he was bringing up stuff, and I had sort of a different take on it. And so one of the pastors spoke up, and he told, I'm not even going to tell you the details, but he told a horrible story of something that had happened to him when he was still very much in drug addiction. And I could tell everybody was horrified by what he had just told. I mean, it was like way TMI. Have you ever had somebody tell something that was like, it was so explicit and gross that we were all like, well, that's going to be really hard to recover. I don't believe I'd have told that one. And so from him saying that, a discussion came up, and I referred to this. And I said, well, there was a situation in the Corinthian church that Paul had to address. And the pastor said, yeah, well, they had to repent of it. I said, They may have, but you have to come to your own conclusion with that. He said, no, they repented. I said, I'm not trying to argue with you. But if you read 2 Corinthians, it just says that Paul reconsidered. And he said, let him back in, lest he be overtaken by too much sorrow. And I could tell it really kind of floored the guy. And he's like flipping through his page and said, I'm not trying to argue with you, but I'm just telling you, there's been a lot of gross stuff that's gone on. Just sometimes you just don't know about it. And I wasn't invited back, which is fine with me. Again, I wasn't trying to argue with him. I'm just talking, and but in 2 Corinthians, Paul's just talking about a lot of stuff. It's a very mature letter that he writes to them. So when we get to the part that we call chapter 12, you'll see that he says, he's in this discussion, he says, I didn't want to talk about this stuff, but you've drug it out of me. Is basically what he's saying. Okay, y'all with me? All right, so he starts by saying, no, it's number 1 up there. I know, I'm sure I probably threw you off when I asked for number 7 first. Oh, is it the program? Okay. All right. Well, let me refer to it while they're trying to bring it up. The reason I want to talk about this thing is he's basically saying, now you've brought me to talking about dreams and visions. And he talks about this thing. He says there's a thing that happened 14 years ago, and he's referring to himself, but he refers to himself in third person. I don't know how much Christian TV you used to watch, but back in the day it became very fashionable for people to go to heaven and have a heaven testimony. I mean, it was so much of it. I mean, I'd literally see people on, I won't say which shows, but certain Christian networks. And they'd be like, hey, I heard you went to heaven this week. Like, yeah, I left my body and went to heaven Friday, and Jesus showed me around, showed me my condo. And I said, Jesus, that's really good. And Jesus said, let's go have a steak together. And we did. And I said, I got to go back. And every time like that little thing in me that's always like, it's just always going off when I would hear these guys. Because Paul said, something happened to me where I went to, in the King James, he calls it the third heaven. And he said, it affected me so deeply, I haven't been able to talk about it for 14 years. And even now when I talk about it, I have to speak of myself in third person. Like I know just having gone to foreign countries, when I come back, it's so hard. When somebody says, how was your trip? How do you explain? Like I remember having just come back from the Philippines one time, and like the next night I was at one of Judah's Little League games, and people were asking me, how was your trip? And it's like I'd been to another planet. I thought, how do I even describe to you where I've just been? It's like, it's not just the other side of the world. It's so different. And I would end up just by saying it was very Filipino. Like there's no way to explain it to you. So you can imagine going to whatever heaven is. How do you just come back and like, yeah, I was in heaven. Jesus said to tell y'all, hey. I'm like, that's just BS. I just don't believe it. Like everything in me is like, you might have had a really powerful dream because you took too much melatonin or something, but I don't think you went to heaven. All right? Did we find it yet? Nope. Say what? Okay. It may have been me messing you up by going with number 7 first. Okay. All right. What, Eddie? Let's bind him. Saints are praying. But here's the point. The main thing, and it'll come up in a minute. He says, whether in the body or out of the body, I can't tell. He said, I don't know if I physically went there or if I dreamt it. He's basically saying I'm at a place in my evolution where it feels the same to me, being in the body or out of the body. I don't know how familiar you are with some of the other, I'm not going to call them cults, but other different types of religions and streams of thought. But there's a group, they used to have a big center not far from here called Eckankar. And they were very much into the concept of astral projection. Like they believed that your spirit could leave your body and go visit places. And you would see that in the scriptures. I mean, in the scriptures, there were people who were physically translated. You know, when Philip was ministering to the Ethiopian eunuch, and it says when the conversation was over, he found himself at Azotus. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. But what really captures my attention, and if I can't show it to you today, I'll show it to you next week. He said, AirPlay, wirelessly share content from your iPhone, iPad, or Mac. Isn't that awesome? That's what it actually says in the original. That'll preach. He said, choose this device, Metron Roku. Anyway. But when you have been taught to create your reality through the paradigm of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, everything looks binary to you. Everything is either or. Everything is light versus darkness, heaven versus hell, good versus evil. When you begin to see everything through the tree of life, everything just becomes everything. So that something that could be just called a physical experience, actually, okay, we got it? Come on, Jesus. Shandarabahoya. Oh, thou scream. No, we ain't got it. It was a lot. Everybody stretch your hand toward the purple screen. I'm feeling it. Come on, Jesus. All right, well, tell me if it comes up. The more you see everything through the tree of life, well, I'll give you an example. Luke 6:33, Jesus says, give and men shall give unto you back. Meaning the supernatural return, it's not going to float down out of heaven. It's not going to be money in the fish's mouth. It can be what? All right. Let me finish that thought. Have you ever had somebody give money to you and you're like, I know this is a person I know, but this is as much a miracle as if I walked on water. Y'all with me? All right. Now we're cooking with grease. All right. So he says, you forced me to talk this way, and I do it against my better judgment. But now that we're at it, I may as well bring up the matter of visions and revelations that God gave me. For instance, I know a man, and he's talking about himself, okay? I know a man who 14 years ago was seized by Christ and swept in ecstasy to the heights of heaven. That's where in the King James he says there was a man taken up to the third heaven. And the reason I've got this in caps, he says, I really don't know if this took place in the body or out of it. Only God knows. I also know that this man was hijacked into paradise. Again, whether in or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. There he heard the unspeakable spoken, but was forbidden to tell what he heard. This is the man I want to talk about. But about myself, I'm not saying another word apart from the humiliations. And when he says humiliations in the other translations, it says weaknesses. And that's where he goes on to say, because I had such amazing revelations, I was given a thorn in the flesh to balance me out. And but the main point I want to get across here is Paul seemed to be at a place in his journey where the spirit world and the physical world had so aligned that he couldn't tell which one he was in sometimes. Like when he said, we are seated with him in heavenly places, he wasn't talking about floating up in the cosmos somewhere. He's saying, I've had these situations. I mean, I was even thinking about this yesterday, and I didn't really do a deep dive study on it, but I refer to Paul saying to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's usually my go-to reference when someone has passed away. But I was thinking about the word absent yesterday. It nearly implies you're in and out of the body. Like when you were teaching school, if somebody wasn't there that day, you didn't assume they had died or dropped out of school. They were absent. And the idea is they'll probably be back at some point, probably tomorrow. And, you know, on more than one occasion, Paul was stoned and left for dead, and then, you know, he comes crawling out. I mean, it kind of sounds like to me where he says to be absent from the body means you're kind of in and out of it. I talked to Leona, 48 hours before the day she transitioned. And in that conversation, which I have referred to many times, she said, because that day I said to her, I said, Leona, I really want you to pull through. I don't want to be in the world without you. And she said, I want you to pull through your thing too. I don't want to be in the world without you. But, and I didn't think about this, Ernie, until a few days after her funeral. She said, even if I'm not here, I'm still going to be following you. I'm going to be with you even if I'm not here. And it's nearly like when she said it the first time, my brain just wouldn't receive it. I'm like, la, 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 don't tell me you're not going to be here. But on more than one occasion, I've kind of felt like she's still around. And at her service, I said, I know theologically people don't become angels, but I felt like, you don't have to answer this, Ernie, but I think it's probably safe to say Leona probably never said a negative word about me. I can't imagine that she did. I mean, don't tell me if she did, but she just seems like, and I think if you had come to her and said something about me, she would have said something negative to you. That's how protective she was. That's why she said, Bishop, you could never, ever, 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 ever do anything that I would think is wrong. And if you were wrong, I would tell everybody he was right. And I said, so I'm like Donald Trump, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. She said, if you did, I would tell him he had a good reason. So at her service, I said, I don't believe, theologically, according to the scriptures, people don't become angels. Angels are another company of beings. But I said, in Leona's case, I just feel like she's kind of a guardian angel. I just feel like, this next scripture. Now, this may sound unrelated, but just bear with me, okay? This is 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 3 through 15. Now, Moses said, Moses is making up laws right and left. He forbade anybody to talk to mediums or diviners. He said, do not speak with what he called the dead. He was all over that. But he was also all over don't eat shrimp and don't shave the sides of your face. So, you got to keep Moses' law in perspective. But typically, if you were raised in church world, you were taught don't go to fortune tellers and don't use the Ouija board and and I'm not trying to get you to use it. I'm just saying, you may be familiar with this story, but let me show you what happened here. I'm not going to give you all the backstory, but it says Samuel was now dead. Samuel was the prophet that Saul would have gone to. Back then, a king always had a prophet that he referred to, and that prophet was sort of his North Star to, give him guidance. Samuel was now dead. All Israel had mourned his death and buried him in Ramah, his hometown. Saul had long since cleaned out all those who held seances with the dead. So Saul had gotten up and made this big edict like, nope, we're not having any more of that. No more seances. Stop talking to people. Don't contact the mediums or the people who speak with the departed. The Philistines had mustered their troops and camped at Shunem. Saul had assembled all Israel and camped at Gilboa. But when Saul saw the Philistine troops, he shook in his boots, scared to death. So what it's saying is there was a time when Saul was leading the army. If he had ever felt overwhelmed, he could go to Samuel, and Samuel would prophesy and say, this is what you need to do. Well, now Samuel's gone. I can't tell you how many times I'll read somebody's post. They'll say, oh man, my mama died 20 years ago, and I sure could use her advice today. I wish I could talk to her today. I miss her so much today. Hang on. Saul prayed to God, but God didn't answer, neither by dream, nor by sign, nor by prophet. So Saul ordered his officials, and this is way off the record because he's made this illegal. He's saying, I have hereby outlawed necromancy or speaking with the dead. But he's like, I need somebody to tell me what to do. So off the record, he says, find me someone who can call up spirits so I may go and seek counsel from those spirits. His servant said, there's a witch at Endor. If you ever watched Bewitched, her mother's name was Endora. It was named for this, okay? So basically, Saul gets up and he says, witches are outlawed. Hey, you know a witch? Saul disguised himself by putting on different clothes. Then, taking 2 men with him, he went under the cover of night to the woman and said, I want you to consult a ghost for me. Call up the person I name. The woman said, just hold on now. You know what Saul did, how he swept the country clean of mediums. Why are you trying to trap me and get me killed? Saul swore solemnly, as God lives, you won't get in any trouble for this. She had no idea she's actually talking to him, okay? The woman said, so whom do you want me to bring up? Samuel. Bring me Samuel. Now this is interesting. It says, when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out loudly to Saul, why did you lie to me? You're Saul. You remember in the story of the madman at Gadara? I can't say it without laughing because I remember when my kids were small. I didn't know they ever paid attention to this Bible story. But I would hear them, like they'd be in the basement playing and they'd be screaming so loud. I would call down and like, would y'all settle down, please? What are y'all playing? And I remember Jared saying one time, we're playing Madman of Gadara. I said, what? And they had heard the teaching, so they would blindfold one of them, and he was the madman. And so they were like, and I said, y'all, that is a crazy game for y'all to be playing, but that's kind of innovative for you. Like, I would have never thought of playing that. But anyway, that's what they would do. When you were the one that was demon-possessed, you got to just go crazy. And they sounded very demon-possessed from the basement. But what's interesting in that story is when the demons see Jesus, they know who he is. Many times Jesus' own handpicked followers didn't know who he was. Don't you remember when Peter says, I say you're the Christ, Son of the living God? Jesus is like, wait, what? Can we get somebody to record that? Because they were so clueless. And the demons were like, yeah, we know. They even said, are you here to throw us away before the time? They knew theology. And they asked his permission, please don't send us out of this country, let us go into the pigs. And it's interesting, this woman was so tuned in to the spirit world that as soon as she saw Samuel, she says, oh my God, you're Saul. Okay? The king told her, You have nothing to fear, but what do you see? She said, I see a spirit ascending from the underground. Now, in the Old Testament, there was a word Sheol, Sheol, and it just meant the unseen. In the English Bibles, that got translated hell, but it was never meant to be a place of punishment. When David said, thou will not leave my soul in hell, he was saying, you will not leave my soul in Sheol. You will not leave my soul in an unseen place. Okay? Because nobody knew, and we still don't. You don't know when you bury a loved one, like where are they? Are they conscious? Are they aware of this place? I mean, who knows? And what does he look like? Saul asked. An old man ascending, robed like a priest. Saul knew it was Samuel. He fell down face to the ground and worshipped Samuel, saying to Saul, why have you disturbed me by calling me up? And if you read the rest of it, it's irrelevant to this story. But the thing is Samuel ends up prophesying to him just like he did when he was still in the body. Y'all still with me? I'm not going to tell you this story again because I've told it so many times, but I am going to refer to it. The day that I've told you about so many times that my 4 grandparents appeared to me from the other side, my life was never the same after that. My hate mail stopped. I was bulletproof after that. When my very Pentecostal grandmother looked at me from the other side, and she said, Merle, because Addie Mae was legalistic. I mean, every statement she made opened with, the Bible speaks out against. But she looked at me and said, on that side, that kind of stuff matters. On this side, doesn't matter at all. And I felt freedom. Nobody can tell me that I was having an hallucination. I had a visitation from my 4 grandparents who had been long deceased. And after that, I can nearly point to that afternoon as that day everything changed for me. I don't care what you say to me about who I really am, about my life. I can look right at you and say, Addie Mae said I was fine. Because she was really, nothing against my mother, and I don't think Mom's watching today. Mom wouldn't be surprised to hear me say this. She was really more like my mom. My mom was so young when she had me, and she was still growing up herself. When I would stay with my grandmother, she was more maternal. She just was. And she was like a very authoritative word in my life. And when she looked at me from the other side, it was a very powerful experience. Now, I'm not. This teaching is not for you to have visitations from ghosts. But the thing is, I don't think they necessarily are ghosts. I think they are people who live on the other side. I don't even know if the other side's the right word. I think there are people who live here in another dimension. The next thing I want to show you is a quote by Lawrence Gallion. And it says, the spirit world is filled with power, substantiality, and presence. I recommend you work on changing your consciousness with regard to spirit and begin to see spirit as the power matrix from which the physical world manifests. As a person's spirit eyes start to open, he or she will begin to realize that she has had it backwards all along. The physical world is thin and gossamer compared to the spirit realm. This is what I have personally embraced even from my own journey. I feel myself, I still live in the real world. I communicate to people. I see my kids. I go to movies. I have relationships. But I also feel myself existing more and more in another dimension. Because, and you know, one way I know is there are things, and I'm telling you, it's deeper than just maturing. It's not that. It's if somebody knows they've got 24 hours to live, they're not concerned about a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? If somebody's, literally dying and you're talking to them saying, interest rates are going up. They don't care because they're disconnected from this world. Are you hearing me? I am feeling myself. It's not maturity. It's something else. It's like it just doesn't matter to me now. And I'm not trying to make some kind of statement that I'm about to die. It's not even that. I am existing in another dimension so that something happens, and I think, if this had happened 2 years ago, I would have been torn out of it would have just messed me up. And now I'm like, so what? It just doesn't matter because I don't live in the physicality that much. I'm very much in a physical body. I'm going in to have surgery because my physical shoulder is in pain. But that's not me. I'm just very aware that it's a vessel that I live in so that I can communicate in the material world. But I really am a spirit living in a physical vessel. And that's why when I say I'm not ever going to die, please understand what I mean by that. I just feel like what I visualize for myself, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I see myself walking into the light more and more until at some point I just disappear into the light. Does that resonate with anybody? And I'm not saying there's not a time where my physical body will cease to function, but it doesn't. I'm not afraid of death because it feels irrelevant to me. I think what we perceive on this side as death is not what people are perceiving on the other side. I don't think the lights go out for them. I don't think they stop breathing. I think they just are suddenly aware, I was sort of already in this dimension, and now I'm fully there. But what I'm seeing here is, and it totally sounds like Samuel, because he's like, really, why did you disturb me? I don't want to prophesy to you anymore. But this medium calls about, and I was reading some articles about it, and a lot of fundamentalists were saying this was a lying spirit. It was a demon speaking to him that was pretending to be Samuel. And I think, have you read it? There's nothing demonic about that at all. If anything, Saul worships him. And there's nothing dark about it at all. It's like, I need to hear from you, and the fact that you died is irrelevant because you're still my guy. You're still my prophet. I still need you to prophesy to me. And so guess what? He got a prophecy. Let me show you this next one. I love William Blake, and here he wrote. It's actually a little poem. It says, "To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." Now, that's why when you're on the beach with your grandkids and you have this sense of euphoria, that's why it feels like heaven. You know why it does? Because it is heaven. The first time I went to New York City, and I've been going at least once a year now for 30-something years. And it's still one of my favorite places to go. But I had read about New York City my whole life. I had visualized it. I had meditated it. I had talked about it. I had studied it. So the first time I went there, I knew where stuff was. I mean, I didn't have to refer to a map. I'm like, oh, we're on Fifth Avenue. Well, Empire State Building should be on the corner of 5th and I think, 34th? And I just knew to walk in that direction. So once I was there, it felt familiar to me because I had already been there so many times in my mind. To the point that I could understand when Paul said, this thing happened to me, but whether it was in the body or out of the body, I can't tell anymore. We used to sing a song. It was in the Church of God hymnal. Oh, this is like heaven to me. This is like heaven to me. I've crossed over Jordan to Canaan's fair land, and this is like heaven to me. So when we are happy, we sing and we shout. Some don't understand us, you see. We're filled with the Spirit, there is not a doubt. And this is like heaven to me. And the whole point of the song was, I don't have to wait till I go to heaven because I'm already feeling heaven. Heaven's already real to me. And that's why he says to see a world in a grain of sand. I've referred to this many, many times, but it's a scene from the play Our Town by Thornton Wilder, who wrote the Merchant of Yonkers, which became the play The Matchmaker, which they put music to and became Hello, Dolly. And he was a great American novelist. And in the play Our Town, it's a surrealistic play, and it shows the main character in the play, the wife, dies, and they show everybody at the funeral, the graveside, like all the living people are standing on this side of the stage with umbrellas because it's raining at the graveside, and you see her leave the living and go stand on the other side of the stage with the dead, okay? And so all of the dead are looking back at the living, and they're saying, they're just making certain observations. And she said, oh, I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back. And so they say to her, you can go back. Everybody's allowed to go back one day. You can just pick which day you'd like to relive. And she said, oh, I don't know, it'd either be my wedding day or the day my firstborn child was born. I've got to think about it. And they said to her, no, don't go back on a very significant day. Go back on the most uneventful, boring, plain day you can think of. Because even then, you'll be so overwhelmed at how wonderful it was that you didn't even realize it. And to recognize that you're living in heaven now, which is why I titled this On Earth as It Is in Heaven, is the most spiritual thing you can do. It doesn't mean you're out of touch with humanity. You still got to pay your bills and do all this kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, that when I say I'm finding myself living more and more in another dimension, does that resonate with anybody? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Do you understand that it's not just maturing? It's not something you can learn from a self-help guru. It's something deeper than that. It's like I'm still here, but I'm not here. And sometimes I'm absent from the body. Next thing I want to show you is it's a meme. It just says, everything is spiritual if you are aware. Everything is material if you are not aware. Probably, y'all had a good cruise, right? Were there moments in the cruise where you were just having such a good time that it felt like heaven just for a minute? I've certainly felt it on some of our meditation weekends. That last one we did in St. Simon's, when we were in that structure, we were sort of outside, but not really, and it kind of felt like an upper room. There was a couple of times there that it really felt like heaven. It was like the membrane between the two dimensions had gotten so thin that it would be really easy. I love the way it says in the message there. I don't know if you noticed, Paul said he was hijacked into paradise. It was just like I was taken against my will. And there's been a couple of times where a lot of times where heaven was so real, you could smell it. You could feel it. Your natural senses were aware of it. This next quote I want to show you is Eckhart Tolle says, being spiritual has nothing to do with what you believe and everything to do with your state of consciousness. One thing I talked about Thursday night when I was talking about Jacob and the stairway into heaven, and I'd never seen this before. This is the part I'd never taught on before. But I just heard Billy Porter say, the angel of the Lord is encamped around about me all my life. And when he said it, faces started coming to me. I'm like, oh yeah, that person was like an angel. And they've been like an angel. And they were an angel. But some of those people are no longer in my life. And that was a question that I've always had. Like, why does that happen? Why is it that there are people who come into your life who are really significant, and they really play an important role in your life, but they don't go the distance with you? And I just saw it clear as a bell. I felt the spirit of revelation. When Jacob saw the ladder or the stairway, it says the angels were ascending and descending. They were coming in and going out. You feel me? And I can't tell you the sense of peace that it gave me. To say, I don't have to try to understand why this person was seasonal in my life, because I loved them so much. And now I think it just means they came out of heaven and then they ascended back up. They were coming in and out. This is how I can always judge Revelation. It just gives me so much peace. It was such an answer to something that has just troubled me for years. Like, why is that? Because I've had people just disappear from my life and never tell me why. And my last word with them was like, we were good with each other. But I realized, they were angels. And they ascended and descended. And people come into your life for a season and they fulfill their purpose and then they move on. But it's like all the answers was there at Bethel, where Jacob says, I saw heaven open up. He said, this is the very gate of heaven, but how awesome is this place? The Lord is here and I didn't know it. You know what it means to me right now? When I think about the age that I am now, I think, how awesome is this place, where I'm at this age on the journey? I loved being 25. I loved being 30. I loved being 40. I loved being 50. But how awesome is this place? I don't long for the past. I don't. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't aware that my body at 65 has some limitations it might not have had at 21. But it doesn't make me long, because that kid at 21, bless his heart, there was so much he didn't know. You know what I mean? The thought of going back and being him again, like, oh, baby, no. I look at some pictures of me back in the day, and I'm like, I was cute and all, but look in those eyes. Those were some clueless eyes. And you can say the same thing about Jesus because it's just things you didn't know. So to be able to say, how awesome is this place? And when my next birthday comes, how awesome is this place? The Lord is here, and I want to celebrate every part of my life. There's, you've heard the famous Betty Davis quote that aging is not for sissies, and that's not the word she actually used, but you get the drift. But yeah, in one sense that's true, but there's some real perks to getting to a certain age and knowing who you really are and knowing what you really like and not being manipulated by peer pressure and you just learn if you do it right, you just learn how to say no, and no is a complete sentence, and you stop being such a people pleaser, and you also learn that, man, something that happens to you, if that happened 20 years ago, you would have thought it was the end of the world, and now you're like, whatevs. It's like there's been a couple of things that have happened to me recently that I literally tried to muster up the negative feeling about it. I'm like, am I losing my ability to worry and to stress over something? Because I should be feeling anxiety over this, and I just can't feel anything but peace. Where is that coming from? It's coming from another dimension. That I have dual citizenship. I have an earth passport and a heaven passport. It sounds to me that Paul was kind of going in and out of that a lot. At one point he writes to the Philippians and he says, I could just go on the other side and stay there, but I think it'd be more advantageous for you if I stay on this side. But if it was left up to me, I would just go on, because he had seen the other world enough that he was accustomed to it. You ever had one of those friends that they keep going on vacation to the same place, and they love it so much that one day they end up buying a house there? And you think, wow, y'all really love that place, don't you? Yeah. Because it's got all this stuff attached to it. Ken's on call today, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, we went with his extended family to Daytona, and I love it because he loves it so much. It's, going to eat in a group of 30 people, to me, is a lot of trouble. I'm like, can't we just, we all have to get, and I could tell, if you're watching today, boo, it's true. I could tell, like, when he's trying to get a table, and I said, Ken, do we all have to sit together? And the way he looks at me, like, never mind. I understand this is important to you. And the reason I know it's important is because both his parents have passed on. And when he was a boy, that was their big deal. They were all blue-collar workers. So for them to get off for a few days to go to Florida was something that it meant something to his memory, his childhood memories, that it doesn't mean to me. And so I really tried, this last trip, I really tried to get inside his head, because it's not something I look forward to that much. I mean, they're sweet, but it's a lot. And, when you've got 30 people on vacation together, there's guaranteed drama. And this year it bordered on reality show drama. And so there's a part of me that says, do we really have to do this? But like, even, when I said, are you going on down? He said, yeah, we go from Saturday to Saturday. I said, well, why don't you just wait till after Metron? I'll ride down with you. And he said, no, we go from Saturday to Saturday. And I realized, I hear you. So he got up. Don't be mad if you're watching. He got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and drove down there. And he texted me, he said, I'm meeting at the Cracked Egg. I said, did you meet everybody? He said, no, I'm here before anybody else. And I thought, you could have slept in a couple hours. But that's what they used to do. He used to get up they would get up before day and drive. So for him, it's not just looking at Daytona Beach. He's seeing memories, things that he experienced growing up. So I walked down the beach and I said, show me where your uncle's motel used to be, and I could tell he really wanted to talk about that because honestly, that's the way I feel about Atlanta. That I think some people, when I'm pointing to something, saying something that I like about it, you may look at it and go, yeah, okay, that's good. What I'm thinking is, no, I remember when we moved back to Atlanta when I was 12, I was so happy to move back, and I could go back to my school that I loved, and I could be with all my cousins. It was like the happiest. I was so ready to get out of where we lived in Bremen. And so when I look at a place, you might look at it and say, I just see some homeless people there. I'm like, no, you're not seeing everything that I've seen collectively, all the joy that represents to me. What's that? Exactly. And that's why you have to honor the places that other people feel that way about, because you say, what do you think, that's heaven? Yeah, they do. It is their piece of heaven. Yeah. That's how heaven is revealed to you. You probably feel that way about Cabbagetown because you connect with your ancestors there. And I respect that. I understand that. And what I want to get across to you of this month is that's spiritual. That's not just being sentimental. This is not sentimentality. It's spiritual. Let me say it to you this way. Heaven is distilled in your consciousness. It doesn't drop in one big deposit. It's little by little by little by little. You start being more aware of heaven, which, if you age correctly, is one of the main perks of it, because you start finding out, this is where I find heaven. That's why I always joke about when people say to me, y'all go New York at Christmas? Yeah. Is it really, really crowded? It's insane. Yeah, it's insane. You ever going back? Yeah, week before Christmas, I'm sure we'll be back. Isn't that hell? Oh, no, I don't necessarily want to live there, but when I'm there for a little bit of time, it's heaven, because I'm also remembering a zillion wonderful memories that connected. When somebody says, you couldn't pay me to go to New York at Christmas time, I'm not only not paying you, I didn't even invite you. Like, I don't care if you ever go. I'm not trying to get up a trip with 30 people. What, son? Well, and I feel the same thing. Like last night, I didn't even know it. Ken said, because I live on Centennial Park, he said, they're doing the fireworks early this year. They're going to do them on Saturday night. I said, no, I didn't know. He watches the local news when he's at work, so he actually ends up knowing more about Atlanta, because I'm watching. I won't tell you what I'm watching, but that's not the news channel I watch. I could probably say MSNBC in this crowd, but I said, no, I didn't even know. So last night, I just walked up on my roof and stood there and watched one of the most amazing fireworks shows I've ever watched. I didn't have to sit in traffic. It wasn't hot. I just walked up there, took pictures. Amazing. Hey, neighbors. Some people say, you couldn't pay me to live downtown. I didn't even ask you to visit. But for me, I walked up there and I said, it's like heaven. And I was thinking about last night, pardon me for referring to Leona so much, Ernie, but the painting that y'all bought? It's fireworks. I know it looks like flowers, but I painted that because I remember going up on my roof one time, and when I actually bought that loft 20 years ago, and it represents a lot to me. And I remember having all my kids up there, and Jared had been in Europe, and we hadn't seen him for a long time. He had just been back, and I was watching, and I wanted to capture it on canvas. So that painting has a lot of joy in it to me. That it'd be hard to describe if you weren't there, because you might say, I don't like fireworks. They're loud. They make my dog scared. Like, I didn't ask you to participate. But that, for me, is heaven. Is any of this making sense to you? All right. But I totally agree with this. And that's what being spiritual has to do with your state of consciousness. One thing I want to say, Leslie, I'm sure, is watching today. She texted me this morning. She had a physical thing she had to deal with this week. And she said, when I heard your voice on the 11:11, she said, I fell into a deep sleep. And it was, I can't tell you how important it was. And then because she had heard that teaching, and she said, you're my angel. And I said, I know. And she said, and I'm going with you the distance, because she knew, like, I'm not on the ladder ascending and descending. And I got that. This day we have right now, I could look around this room with just about all of you in one way or the other, and I could come up with some memory I have with you that, if it's not heavenly, it borders on being heavenly, where we experience something together. Don't ever take that for granted. And then we're going to end up, yeah.
Leona saw the world through your eyes. That's how she looked at things. And as a result of that, that's how I looked at the world through Leona's eyes. Because she always had such profound thing about you. And she says, that's my pastor there forever. And he can never do any wrong. So I had to get myself to look at her and what she saw. And that's what I think that you two had such a bond and whatnot. And she always, on her deathbed, when you came in, her whole world just lit up. She just, I looked at her face and the sheer joy, and I think that she thought that I can go now. Only thing that she wanted when that day on her deathbed was, she just said to the two ICU doctors is, I don't want to be in any pain when I pass away, and I will transition out, and I'm fine. And that was her. And I had to see her, and so I had to let her go. I didn't mean to bring it down to you.
No, it's beautiful.
During this whole time that you were talking, I was thinking about that, and I had to let you know.
Well, I tell you what, since you said that, what was interesting about that, usually I can walk into a room, because I've been going to ICU units my whole life, and I can usually walk in and I can tell if death's there or not. I've walked into some rooms and I'm so aware of it that I want to say, y'all better plan a funeral, because they're not going to make it. I did not feel that with her, and it bothered me, because I thought, when I left there that day, I thought, I know it's serious. She's going to pull through. I did not. That's why when you called me that night and said she went, I was like, you got to be kidding. I did not see that coming at all. And now I'm realizing it's because she didn't die. Do you know what I mean? And that's why she said to me, I have a very real sense that she's listening right now. She said, even if I'm not here, I'm still going to be following you. Nobody's ever said that to me before. It was just, and that's why I don't think I felt it, because it didn't feel final. You know what I mean? It's like,
She may not have wanted you to feel that.
well,
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, she may not. Because she really did love you, Jim. She told me one time, she just wanted that to come too much, because I never want my bishop to think I like somebody over him. Ain't that sweet of you? You know? She did. She was always conscious of you.
That's why she smiles all the time. Remember you said if there's somebody in your congregation in church and you can look and you focus on that person.
Totally.
And her face was always smiling all the
And it was sincere. I would feel energy from her. That's why, when Church and I was really big, I kind of knew who y'all were, but I wasn't, I wasn't sure. And I remember when she had that surgery, when we first moved in that building in Covington, somebody asked for prayer for her, and I said, remind me I think I know who that is, but remind me. And it might have been Debbie said, they sit in the back, and she's the one that smiles all the time. I said, oh, my God, yes. That's them? I said, yes. I knew. And the first Sunday I had Metron, she walked in, she said, into the theater, which is not y'all's neighborhood. Y'all live in Snellville. She walked in, she said, Bishop's got us on a new adventure, and I can't wait to see where we're going. And I was like, thank you for saying that. Wow. No, you didn't bring me down. It's just, that's very powerful. It's just very powerful. And what I'm talking about this month this has nothing to do with being morbid. This is not talking about, it's not even talking about death. I'm not even talking about death. I'm talking about a higher consciousness where the physical it's real, but it's not as real as the spiritual. And I want you to, when I say you've had angels in your life, can you think of angels you've had that you thought if it hadn't been for them, I don't know what I would have done? And they may not be in your life now. They might have ascended and descended. Oh, really? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Somebody brought you to church that didn't come anymore. Like they fulfilled their purpose. They connected you, but they weren't even there. If you're watching at home, you might not be able to hear what we're saying, but just talk amongst yourself. He said, whose kids are these? No, but exactly. You think about the people who introduced you to something or to a person that you think, what would my life be like now if they hadn't done that thing? And maybe they just crawled down the ladder and did their thing, and then they crawled back up, ascended.
Yeah, we can think of the big angels kind of that stepped in our lives at some point. It's that everyday thing that it really gets to you.
Well,
There's just like a random person like, whoa.
One thing that I said Thursday night that I didn't bring up today is, when John wrote what we call the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, in the whole big thing, there's cherubim and seraphim and angelic choirs and archangels and warring angels and creatures that are covered with eyes and the four-faced beast and all of these things. But at the beginning of it turns out it's 7 letters written to 7 churches, and he writes each of them to angels. To the angel of the church at Philadelphia, to the angel of the church at Sardis, to the angel of the church at Laodicea. An angel just meant messenger. He could just as easily have said to the pastor of the church. But it's interesting that he didn't seem to make any distinction between those, I'm assuming, men who were over those churches, he was just writing an administrative letters to his bishopric. And those men were called angels. And then he would also talk about these winged creatures that with two wings they covered their face, and with two, you've read Revelation, you know what I'm talking about. He didn't seem to make any distinction. And that's the point. That person who did something for you didn't do you a favor. You had an angelic visitation. And that's why you've got to stop going. I'm not saying you, but you can't go through your life saying miracles never happened to me. They've happened to you so much that you don't even notice them. You take them for granted. You're so used to it, you don't even think about it because you're just surrounded by the miraculous. The miraculous has happened so much that you just think, oh, it's just another day, and you don't even notice it. That's my point in bringing this. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. You do not have bad days. Yeah, well, you don't know the day I had Friday. Nope. That is completely your perception. And I'm not saying that your feelings aren't valid. I'm not belittling or trivializing your feelings. I'm saying the more you recognize the supernatural, the spiritual, the phenomenal, the incredible, the more it happens. And if you make the mistake of saying, boy, I sure could use a miracle right now, there's nothing more insulting you could do to God. It's like, I don't know if your kids ever did this. I can remember my children in a room full of toys all over the floor crying because they had nothing to play with. And you want to say, do you not see all this stuff? They don't see it. I remember I've got this picture of, I took Jared and Christina to Rock City when they were little, up in Chattanooga. We had done everything there was to do at Rock City. It's not like there's rides or anything. We'd gone through the whole thing. And there's a picture I took a picture right in Jared's face. He's like crying. Because I wanted to remember. He said, we didn't get to do anything. I said, we did everything there is to do. There's nothing else to do here. But they used to do that at Six Flags. We didn't even get ride anything. Well, I stood in line all day long for something. It wasn't for me. We didn't even ride. Yeah, you rode stuff all day. You don't even remember. And, it's aggravating when you're a parent buying all that stuff. Think about how God feels. I never get a miracle. And you're in a room full of them. They're all around. That's why when Jesus said, go consider the lilies, he wasn't being poetic. He was saying, you're so out of touch with the miraculous that you need to just go stare at a flower and say, this is an absolute miracle. Because you've gotten so blasé about it, you don't even notice that it's miracles. All right. I think I'm going to put a comma there. Anybody else have anything you want to say? Beth?
I feel like my whole life has been a miracle. I mean, there have been times where I haven't seen it that way, but my mother wasn't supposed to be able to have any more children, and then I came. I've been in some tremendous car accidents, but I've gotten through them, even the one that they thought would kill me. And I had an angel that came to me. I had a retired state trooper that came to me before the emergency people got there and came to the hospital to check on me and told my parents he had never in his career seen anybody come through an accident like that. In the last 10 years, you, Das, and some things my mother had said to me, those were the things that got me through. I couldn't have done it. You three were my miracles.
if you didn't hear what Beth was saying, she was talking about her angels in her life. And I'm glad you brought up Doss because it was the year anniversary of her passing this week. And I could say the same thing about Doss. I doubt, I would find it difficult to believe Doss ever said anything about me. And Doss probably hurt you. She could probably, I would suggest, well, she offered to. Because one time I was saying something about somebody had done something. Because she's in New York, she says, and she was not kidding. She says, "Bitch, tell me who it was, where they live, because I'm going there right now." I said, "No, Dawes, I don't need you." She said, "No, I'm going to go beat somebody's ass. I'm going to do it right now." But there was something, I didn't want to encourage violence, but there was something really empowering to think, man, I got to calm her down. She's going to go cut somebody. Yeah, this was the year anniversary of her passing. What a great energy. Take comfort in this. Those people have not ceased to exist. They are part of a great cloud of witnesses that I think may be very much still involved in our lives. Yeah.
Remember the other day I sent you that picture of the hand behind the veil? And there's times that I can physically almost see that. It's just, I've got her and so many of my family. I feel like my mom sometimes.
Well, and that's why I brought up the story of Saul, because I think it's appropriate to reach out to the other side sometime. I love it because Saul was not forbidden to hear from Samuel. You know what I mean? And so sometimes when you need to ask for help, that's one thing that the Catholics really, I think, had something special about the idea of praying to ancestors and that sort of thing. And even I remember when Wellington, I remember when you went with us on the meditation weekend in Cherokee, and I talked a lot about indigenous people and being aware of the ancestors who live, because it's still a Cherokee reservation. And you'd said, in African culture, it's very much about talking to the ancestors and being aware of them. But then when Western Christianity evangelized Africa, it was like, no, don't talk to the dead, don't talk to the ancestors. And you were saying, even though I'm not Native American, that really, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was something like, that really restored that to me. Isn't that what you said to me? Is that it's okay to talk to the ancestors. And this whole thing about, what I used to hear is, no, don't do that because it could be demons assuming their form or deceiving you. That's such nonsense. In fact, earlier in the week I did a teaching about the supernatural and the natural, and I used that scripture. It's one of the most bizarre scriptures I've ever read. But it's in one of the Chronicles and one of the Samuels. It's when it has to do with Ahab and God. He brings all the spirits before him who seem to be just neutral. And he says, I can't decide what to do. And one of them steps forward and says, I'll go be a lying spirit in the mouth of Ahab. And he can deceive the people. And God says, that's a great idea. That's just bizarre. Because we were taught there's angels and demons, and and they were like, nah, we're just spirits. And dare I also say, haven't you had some devils in your life? Some people who came and stole, killed, and destroyed, and you were supernaturally delivered. You've had angels and demons all over the place, and sometimes they might have been the same person. Now I'm getting too deep. But I thought that's such a strange scripture where the Spirit says, I'll go being a lying spirit. And God says, that's a great idea. What? All right. Did y'all get anything out of this? It's going to be a good series, right? Let's all stand. Well, I pray that you would feel the presence of God. Did you feel it? Did you? All right. Again, Spirit of God, we are aware. Make us aware. Make us more aware. Make us more conscious that we are living and seated in heavenly places. Remain standing, please. I'm going to show you this. And thank you for those of you that have stepped up. I need you to keep doing it. We need to get back in our abundance zone. So if we can play
Contributing to
the outro,
Metron is quick
please.
and easy. You can give anytime using any smartphone. Text the amount you would like to donate to 404-620-5044. You will then receive a notification that you successfully completed your donation. You may also visit bishopthenow.com and click the support tab to give there as well. When you contribute to Metron, you're also donating to the charity or organization of the month. Thank you for your investment into Metron.
If you have a check, just make it to JESM. If you have cash, just pay it forward. I just speak a blessing of awareness over you this week, that you are very aware that the angel of the Lord encamps round about you, and that you see the stairway into heaven, that you recognize the gate of God, and that you recognize the phenomenal, incredible, supernatural that you exist in every day of your life. Miracles are not only coming, miracles are here. God bless you. Go in peace. See you next Sunday. Remember, Chandra is going to be with us.